Hey, so I set out to make the most comprehensive worldly world weaver guide I could possibly make, and here's the result. I hope it's useful, and thanks for watching. So, because I'm aware of the enemy's forthcoming push, I set up a bomb by dropping Lava Font, Pyroclastic Blast, and Unsteady Ground, which is a CC. I follow that up by using Burning Retreat to cast Meteor Shower after fully attuning to fire for a damage boost, followed by Arcane Wave, Lava Font again, and then Air Attunement skills to kill the downs that were just generated. After this, I switched to Water Attunement to cast Static Field and Ice Spike, which is a CC and a high damage skill, followed by Earth to give me access to Eruption, another dual skill AoE, and a Chill skill, followed by Fire, which will now be my second bomb setup. I climb uphill and I quickly fully attune, Burning Retreat, Meteor Shower, Arcane Wave, and then Air Attunement skills to clear the downs. I repeat the same rotation until I see an opportunity to use Fiery Greatsword, giving me access to a Greatsword cleave which is similar to Warrior, and I cast Skill 5, which is yet another AoE. I follow that up with Lava Font because it's a ground targeting skill, and it won't be affected by the enemy bubble, which stops projectiles. I Burning Retreat to get closer to tag, and I see an opportunity to use Meteor Shower, which is conveniently available already. I switch to Fire Attunement mid-cast to maximize damage. I notice the enemy approaching and begin casting my garbage AoEs. I switch to fire to begin setting up a full bomb, again using Lava Font, Pyroclastic Blast, Unsteady Ground, Fiery Greatsword skill 5 and 3, Arcane Wave, fully attuning to fire, Lightning Flash, Lava Font, Twist of Fate, Burning Retreat, Meteor Shower. I notice a group to my left about to gank our backline and I try to adjust, but I'm downed. So I hope for a rally and I misform toward tag. I do rally. I dodge to avoid damage and I move back to tag. So here I pick up a Fiery Greatsword that someone else dropped. I cast skill 5 and I begin my usual DPS rotation similar to before. So in this clip I have to first get out of the damage coming my way, so I backcast Unsteady Ground and Pyroclastic Blast as I'm getting out of the AoEs, and then I skip to my burst damage rotation. Again, you can see how Arcane Wave and Fiery Greatsword are incredibly useful. After taunting the enemy with blue balls, I begin casting my usual rotation. I could have done a little bit better during this clip, I could have been a bit quicker, but the effects are equally devastating. After my fire damage burst and air attunement downs cleanup, I restart my rotation on the enemies below. Sensing a hard push from the enemy, I lay down some AoEs at the top of the stairs, then I make an attempt to cast Meteor below. Halfway through my cast, I realize I will probably not stay alive at the top of these damp stairs, so I quickly Lightning Flash below where it is slightly safer. Slightly. I follow this up with Lava Font and Fiery Greatsword to finish the battle. So general gameplay concepts. Try to keep this in mind. Prediction, procedure, and adjustment. You don't really need to memorize those things. They're not anything that I would say or anything I have to remember, but it's a good way of conceptualizing what you should be aware of. So, prediction is looking at the enemy group as a single entity and paying attention to its movement, or multiple entities and keeping track of each. You should always watch your enemy closely, because eventually you will become intuitive in knowing what the enemy is going to do next. So for example, when you see one member of the opposing Zerg do a U-turn and head in your direction, followed by everyone behind that person making the same U-turn, not only do you know who their commander is, but you also know that there is a higher likelihood that they're about to push in your direction. So being able to differentiate between a fake push and a real push will take time, but if you pay close attention, you will eventually gain a sense for it. Procedure is asking yourself, what is the next skill I can use that serves the greatest function? And this is the simplest of the three concepts, but it's also probably the hardest to master. This will take time, but eventually you will gain a sense of what skill is most appropriate, or what combination of skills is most appropriate. And adjustment can be thought of like this. Of the situations I've predicted in the first step, what are my plans if shit hits the fan? Do I still have a stun break available, and how should I change my gameplay to account for that? So being able to backcast is also a good skill to have. If you can backcast as well as you can cast forward, you can use your strafe left and right keys to run away from a target while precision bombing behind you. So this is pretty useful as a weaver. In fact, there probably isn't any other situation in the game where this technique is more useful. So if you backcast while an enemy is on your tail, you can keep pressure on them. So next you should consider whether or not the key binding and mouse keyboard setup you're using is optimal. If you can't press all of your skills with one hand, or if you can't press a weapon skill and a utility skill at the same time, then it may not be optimal for Weaver. Take a look at this video I released a while ago showing how I have my keybind set up for Weaver. It may be true that I have large hands, but it really comes down more to the way that you move your hands than how large they are, lol. Pay attention to how I'm pivoting my entire hand off of individual fingers to increase the distance I can reach. This helps me switch between attunements very effectively. Again, I can almost guarantee that regardless of your hand shape, complicated finger movements are possible with practice, and you should start by practicing slowly and gradually increasing speed. Muscle memory is important. You should know how and when to use aggression. Sometimes it's actually very appropriate to be highly aggressive, even as a squishy build such as a DPS Weaver. If everything around you dies when you touch it, you probably don't need to worry about being too aggressive, until you do. Eventually you will squirrel or do something stupid and get owned, but don't worry, it happens to all of us every now and then. Especially me. Things you can do when you keep getting owned. Every once in a while you're going to come across a group that is way bigger, possibly better, or targets classy builds such as DPS Weavers and Revenants often. As a Weaver, there are a few things you can do. You can, number 1, switch Arcane Wave to Arcane Shield, or Mist Form, or Stone Resonance. Number 2 is focus up, because a lot of the time if you keep dying it's actually just because you're not thinking straight, or you're not thinking fast enough. So focus up, get your shit together. 3, position yourself roughly between the midline and the backline so that you're still getting boons and you have a decent range for casting, but you're also not being beat up in the front line so much. Oh, and did I mention that you should usually be playing in the front line? Because yeah, this is a frontline Weaver build. It's classy, but if you play it well, you should actually be in the front line most of the time. This also means that if you're being hit with any skill that depletes like half of your health bar or more at once, you need to heal immediately or you need to fall back a bit, and that's just how you do it most of the time. But sometimes you'll have to play defensively. So you should be switching attunements often. You should be casting as many skills as you need to before you swap attunements. But generally speaking, you want to switch attunements pretty quickly. You don't want to have very much delay. You want to keep your rotation fluid. There are some situations where you may want to stay in the same attunement, such as after casting Meteor Shower to keep the fire attunement power buff, or to stay in fire to spam autocast if the situation truly calls for it. You want to use Burning Retreat often. This skill is one of the few keys to playing Weaver in World v World effectively, and it can be paired with other skills such as Meteor Shower and Lightning Flash in many useful ways. Watch how I use Burning Retreat and Lightning Flash to safely cast Meteor Shower from a distance. You can do this by pressing the Burning Retreat key, casting Meteor while you're rolling back, and then quickly using Lightning Flash. Mobility skill utilization is one of the core concepts of DPS Weaver, and if you are planning on playing this build, you must be able to do this in order to survive. Twist of Fate. This is probably one of the greatest skills in the entire game, so use this to break stun and to gain super speed. Try to always have at least one charge of this available unless you absolutely have to use both, and sometimes you will. Arcane Wave. This skill, if used effectively, can be a large source of your DPS. It hits 5 targets with a guaranteed critical hit, and it has 2 charges. Fiery Greatsword. In addition to offering 2 mobility skills, skills 3 and 5 of the Fiery Greatsword can be used as a burst, especially when a large Zerg is pushing through his choke. So skill 5 may not hit very hard, but it hits 10 targets and it remains in place for 8 seconds. Number 4, traits and build. So this build is designed for small to large World v World groups. It's not a roaming build. Let's go over the traits you need to be aware of in order to play this build effectively. Sunspot and Electric Discharge. Be aware of how switching to air will cast a 900 range single target spell, and how switching to fire will cast a 180 radius multi-target spell. Raging Storm. Every 3 seconds you have a chance to gain Fury for 2 seconds if you critically hit, and your ferocity is increased significantly while you have Fury. This is partly why in my build I run a Commander's Amulet and Backpiece. The additional 1/4 of a second added to the Fury granted by this trait theoretically adds up to an extra 5 seconds of Fury per minute, which is useful when you do not have a Hammer Revenant in your party. Pyromancers, I don't know how to pronounce that. Some people prefer to use the top trait here, Persisting Flames, which is better used in situations such as raids or fractals, where you have a reliable source of might stacks. In most situations, your damage will be higher if you run the middle trait, Pyromancers whatever the fuck, especially if you also run Strength Runes. Tempest Defense versus Aeromancer's Training. It's up to you whichever trait you want to run here, either bottom or middle, but I personally recommend running bottom for the overall increase of DPS when striking CC'd opponents. The extra damage kicks in only when the enemy is especially vulnerable, and this, in my opinion, is very useful. This doubles as a DPS increase versus Tower Lords whenever the bar is broken. Bolt to the Heart versus Fresh Air. Again, it's up to you whichever trait you want to run, but I prefer the top trait because once again it gives you a damage increase when the enemy is in a highly vulnerable state, and generally results in overall higher damage per second. Pyromancer's Training and Elemental Polyphony, I probably said that wrong. Both of these traits will increase your power while attuned to fire. In World v World, you should note that you only receive both bonuses simultaneously when you are fully attuned. Burning Rage, you deal more damage to burning foes, which synergizes with Burning Precision, which gives you a chance to burn foes you critically strike. Don't be tempted to run lesser Cleansing Fire, you will have more than enough Condi Cleanse by using your heal skill. Master's Fortitude, even if you're not wielding a sword, you will still gain around 1500 vitality, which helps a lot. Swift Revenge, so it's a damage boost and you can also get reliable swiftness. Elements of Rage will give you a 10% damage increase after fully attuning to an element. You also gain precision based on a percentage of your vitality, which is why running half Marauders is currently as effective as it is. I would strongly recommend running ETH Renewal as a heal skill. It provides 8 condition cleanses and 5304 health every 18 seconds. In addition to this, I highly recommend running at least Twist of Fate and Lightning Flash, and optimally Arcane Wave as well. I've tried many different setups for utilities, and this is the one setup I always come back to because it's very effective. The sigils I use for staff are Sigil of Force and Sigil of Bloodlust for maximum damage. I prefer to run Runes of Strength over Runes of the Scholar because Strength runes are more consistent and allow better might stacking, which is important for this build. That's about it. Thanks for watching and good luck.